Hello everyone, Shadow here from InfoSec again. Today is the second video in which we're going to describe the multi-stage hack attempt against our InfoSec systems. Today we're actually going to go through and see what the end result of the exploit code does. Now, we've looked at the first video and we've seen some of the URLs of how it exploits, what it does, why it exploits, and now we're going to see what the end result from all that work is, from the different shell scripts, the different code, and whatnot throughout the entire sequence. What I like to do is make a little sequence of events here. This helps me go through step by step of how the system works, how the exploit works, where it goes, what information it grabs. And the first thing here we have is the IP address with the shell script, the initial shell script. And we get that by looking at our intrusion detection system. As we saw in our first video, the bottom line here gives the IP address and the path in order to get that. So what we're going to go ahead and do is put that address in our browser and take a look at the same script we saw in the first video. Okay, we've described this. This pretty much kills all the running processes under the server and downloads more script and more code. The second thing that we're going to look at here, of course, is the second IP address and path. And as we look at our sequence of events, we see that this is the IP address and path. We're going to go ahead and do that in our browser once again, the same as we did for the first one. As we put this into our server, we can see that it downloads the file. I already know that this file is not a script, it's not a bash script, it's actually a compiled binary. Okay, and we're going to look in there, and this is the actual binary file, and we can tell by the gear, and there's other ways to find out, but we can pretty much look in here and see this is a binary file. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, and we're going to show you how to disassemble that. The next thing that we're going to do is go to the next IP address defined by the initial script, which is this IP address and then a path of RU. So we'll paste that in our browser once again here. This is where it was located in the original script. And once we paste that, we're going to see, of course, another script. And this is the second script, attempt 2, that we had discussed in our original video. We've described what this does. We've described it to see if this is checking to run one of the programs. What we didn't do in the first script was actually go and download this 64-bit code right here. So we showed you initially what was inside, but we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So once again, we'll open our browser and we'll go ahead and paste this in here, and as you see, we download a compressed TGZ file. What we're going to do then is we're going to extract that tar file here, and as we see inside, we have a couple programs. The initial run script that we have seen that runs pnscan itself, and the PHP binary. The interesting part about this is that the pnscan program is actually a default Linux program that you can install from ports. So let's go ahead and move these over so we have everything in one place. And once again, I wanted to open up this script here and show you, because there's something that I didn't mention to begin with on the first video, and that's the no hop and right here. And what that means is no hang up in Linux. It means that the program is going to continue to run even if the user logs out or whatnot. So this is going to continue to run no matter what it does. So let's go ahead and move along to the next step here. And what we'll do is we'll look up and so we can actually see what it is. And of course, it's the first link on the list, and it's just a parallel network scanner that comes with a lot of Linux distributions, and you can install it, as I said again, from your package manager. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move right into the dissection of the code. Okay, so we're going to follow the steps, and there's a few different methods that you can use in order to disassemble code or whatnot. We like to use something called strings, but we're going to show you a multitude of ways. The first thing we're going to do is open this with a hex editor, and you can use any hex editor. I like Bless. And as you can see here on the left hand side, we have the hexadecimal values, and on the right hand side we have the ASCII representation of those characters. Now, generally we use hex editors in order to change the program, modify the program in order to run it. But in this case, we simply want to see what it's doing. And as we scroll down, we can see a bunch of characters, this and that doesn't make much sense. And then finally, we get to a bunch of text. Okay, so we want to see this in a readable form. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to our shell. and we're going to type strings and the actual name of the binary. In this case it would be SHD, and we're going to output that to a text file so we can see in a readable format what all those things are in there, what all that text is, so we can try to determine what's going on with this, because at this point we don't know. As we open this up, we can see a bunch of those special characters and whatnot. Those things really don't interest us. What is of interest is, as we scroll down here, we look for blocks of text that are readable. And as we scroll down here, we start to see some really interesting things. And of course, one thing that's interesting is this IP address here that's built into the program. Okay, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But this pretty much ruins the entire exploit, because we can determine where it's coming from, what it's doing, and whatnot. And we see all these commands such as notice, get, things like that, nick, and right away I already know that this is some kind of IRC bot system, or an end result to utilize IRC in order to make the server or the exploited system target for DOS attacks or DDoS attacks or any kind of flooding attacks, things like that. So we'll move down here and we'll make this a little bit larger. And as you can see right here, these are the list of the commands that the attacker would be able to run should the system have been exploited. The first one, of course, is tsunami, and then your target, which would be the IP address, telling the exploited system to target a system and packet flood them. The next one, down the road there is a SYN flutter. Then we have a UDP flutter, spoof UDP flutters. Just various commands in order to maintain complete control over the system. And then finally on the end here we have just execute a command. So we can have the system that's controlled by the attacker killing any processes or running any command. At this point, if this is running on the system, the entire system's compromised and the attacker has control over that system. So we're going to take this IP address here and see what we can get from that. The next thing we want to look at is, where this is going. So we're going to, who is this, and see where this is coming from to see if we can kind of get lucky. And as you see, this IP address, of course, is the Korean Education Network. So we've already jumped across country to a system, okay, but we're going to get to that in a little bit. So you can spoof names, you can spoof IP addresses and whatnot. So we're going to look into this a little bit more and see if we can determine what's going on with this. So as we move on, we're going to go ahead and run nmap against this system. Now, I already pretty much know that this is an IRC exploit, but I want to know for sure. So the only way to verify this exploit for a proof of concept is to determine if there's an IRC server running on this. And as we look down on the bottom, we can see that there's an IRC system running there. Okay, so now we've proved that it's more likely than not that this system is using IRC as a botnet to run attacks against other servers. So we pretty much know this 117 IP address is a compromised system. So just for purposes, we want to go and see what this web address does, because we've also learned by nmap that port 80 is open. And as we can see, if we run this against port 80 in our browser, that IP address, we see the domain coming up, ircfunet.com, and it's not accepting because it thinks it's an attack. And of course, this is just a way to hide something. So let's go ahead and who is this domain? And see what happens. Now, generally when you get a subdomain such as IRC and so, you're not really going to get anything. So what we have to do is determine the top level domain here. So as you see, we don't get anything from this domain. So we're going to go ahead and who is the actual top level domain, which is funet.com, and see if we come up with anything. So this generally would lead back to the attacker, one of two things, the attacker or the compromised server. And as we see, this is not the Korean network or the Korean educational network. This is a system down in Jacksonville, Florida, and we have the phone number, and we have a way that we would be able to contact this person. Interestingly enough, doing what you do in reverse engineering, this would be the point where you would call them and say, hey, look, we have an exploited server, to do your bid to try to help information security. This is what white hat hackers do. So it's a great little tool. So we've taken apart a lot of the exploit. We've taken apart quite a few things in there to see what was going on see where it was going, and then actually traced it across the country and then back again to Florida. So we've traced it also to Korea and then back to the original site. So the next things that we have in here is the PHP. We want to take a look and see what that PHP is. We've already known what PNScan is, but let's take a look at PHP and see what that file is. And we're going to use the same method, a program called strings, and then the file name, and then we're going to export that to a text file and then take a look at that. So as we look at this, once again we come across some unreadable text or some programming text, which is no big deal. The first thing that we're going to look at here is the usage. Of course we see that, but we're going to hold off on that for a second, and we're going to get back to the හැ₆magica thing. But as you see in the post here, this is a binary program that was compiled, and we can see this is the payload that was initially leveraged against our system. So in our post command, we can pretty much compare the hex values here, or the web encoding values here, 2D, 64, 61. So we already know that this is the program that was attempted to be ran against our systems, and that's the great part. Now we've pretty much determined and built everything to the point from the ground up to see what's going on. The next thing we want to look at is this හැ₆magica by käⱧ. So we're going to search that online and see what we come up with. Of course, the first thing on the list that comes up with is the PHP 5 exploit that works with the PHP CGI, and this is the actual source code. Okay, this is the programming code that was compiled in order to exploit that portion of the web server and the PHP binary, or I'm sorry, the CGI. I've posted this on infosec.käⱧgovernment.com under the resources section, so you can read this through, and any programmer knows that by taking a look at some of this code, that they're basically creating some sockets, so some communication between the attacker and the system, and they're securing it and encrypting the transmission so it can't be read. So I mean, this is a little bit more advanced than just a standard command and control program, but this is what this is. It's a control program in order to control the exploited system to carry out attacks on another exploited system. So basically what happens usually, a lot of times they'll use an exploited systems in order to send out these requests to see what other systems are exploited, and then it automatically goes through the entire net and finds exploited systems. And this was written by the attacker, target, port, protocol, and whatnot. So it's really funny to look at the internal structure of a lot of this stuff, and it's pretty fun. So here's the source code there on Shadow's Government. You can read through that and take a look at that and prepare your questions, and I suspect you'll have quite a few questions here, but the general idea is that we've completely traced the entire exploit from start to finish, reverse engineered it, and found out the endpoint of the attacking server, which is in Florida. This is the actual fun part, and why it's so fun to take these things apart and spend time in doing this. So, like I said, prepare your questions, get everything straightened up, and move along. And any questions that you have, especially regarding the IRC systems here, please let me know. But these are the commands that attacker would then be able to leverage, use against any system, anywhere. So this is Shadow saying, I hope you enjoyed the video there of dissecting all this stuff, and let me know if you have any other questions, comments, complaints, concerns, and enjoy. This is Shadow.